This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview.
Golden Metal Resources plc has confirmed the presence of significant copper target zones with potential for porphyry and skarn-type deposits at its Garfield project in Nevada. We talk a lot about Pilot Mountain, your flagship, but of course you're not a one-trick pony. You have Garfield as well, and you announced, of course, today about the potential for porphyry and skarn-type deposits. First of all, I wonder if you can explain briefly what are porphyry and skarn-type deposits and why are they interesting to you?
Yeah, just I guess a quick geology lesson for all the listeners, because it is important for people to understand what these different things are, because I think you see them used a lot and thrown around in different RNSs, but it is important to understand a bit more technically what they mean. So porphyry deposit or intrusive related deposit is associated with an ascending body of magma. So they're associated with an intrusion at depth. And then skarn type mineralization is essentially when the fluids that come off an ascending magma body or porphyry intersect a skarn type body or a carbonate or limestone unit. So limestone rocks are really reactive. So when those fluids hit limestones, they can drop out a lot of metal. So porphyry deposits are typically much larger. They're probably one of the main sources of copper and potentially gold as well in the world. So a lot of the big mines that you see in certain parts of central, and well, even in Nevada, there's plenty of porphyry deposits that are currently being mined. You see them a lot down in South America, Australia as well. So they're really, really important deposit types globally. And they're usually much larger than skarns, but typically a little bit lower grade. And then a skarn deposit, as I mentioned, when those fluids intersect a limestone and they drop those metals out. So they're two very important deposit types that are found globally. And as you mentioned, we've found very strong evidence of both of those at our Garfield property.
And they can work together. They don't have to be separate deposits. They can actually work together.
They're actually connected. So as I mentioned, what happens is as this porphyry ascends, it will essentially, as the pressure drops, fluids can come off. And if they find a limestone unit, which is really reactive, you're going to get the formation of porphyries and skarns. So every time you see a skarn deposit, you know there's a porphyry somewhere, because the porphyry is the main driver, the main engine of fluid flow within the kind of the crust or the subsurface. So,
and why is
sorry, go ahead.
No, so why is this important for an explorer like you? Does it make it easy to get to? Does it suggest there's lots of mineralization, or is it just a simple matter of it helps you understand the geology?
I think most importantly, it shows us that we potentially have an entire preserved system. Oftentimes what happens is as these deposits form in the subsurface, and there's say 50, 100, 200 million years of tectonic uplift and erosion and things moving around, these things can get cut off, segmented, and you find just little bits and pieces of the, what was formerly a full intact mineralized system. And so you'll see a company who will drill sort of the porphyry or the peripheral of a porphyry deposit, but there's nothing else left. Everything else has been eroded away. So when you see both skarn and porphyry in potentially the same mineralizing system, it shows that you could have the whole thing intact. Which is really important, but just because from a size perspective, but also from a mineralization perspective, to have both the intrusive and the skarn type bodies present on our property or potentially present, that's a very significant development.
Okay. And of course, you've identified two zones, haven't you? The high grade zone and the power line zone, with the high grade zone being their potential for the skarn deposit, and you've designated it as a high priority follow-up due to its potential volume and porphyry characteristics. So just talk us through how you've sort of decided on these two zones and where the priorities are going to be and what the follow-up work is going to be.
Yeah, so one thing that we reference in the RNS is a fully telescope system, and that's what we discussed previously, which was you have potentially the porphyry and the skarn all preserved. So that gives us a much bigger target to explore for. And just because of that alone, it's very rare to find both of those systems present together. As I mentioned, usually you'll find one or the other and they can be cut off. So the fact that we're seeing strong evidence of both makes that a very high priority follow-up. And on top of that, one of the really important things just to note is, we're working with geochemical results right now. However, there's been rock sampling that has been done over the high-grade zone, which return rock samples at surface of over 5% copper. So when we're seeing these anomalies, one of the questions often asked is, okay, well, what does this mean? What kind of grades can we see in the rocks? Well, we're seeing up to 5.5% copper in surface in this zone. So we have the porphyry alteration zone and porphyry mineralization. And then about a kilometer to the northeast, we're seeing skarn type affinity. So we have potentially the full system preserved. And then you add on top of that 5.5% copper at surface. And that obviously, once you start to layer these pieces of data on, it just gets more and more exciting. So it's, and everyone loves copper. I love copper. This property is right off the main state highway. It's about 10, 20 minutes to town. There's a power line across it. So, I mean, it's just check. It's getting really exciting. And we're looking forward to obviously moving it forward. And then in terms of next steps, we're going to send a very experienced sort of geological mapper and prospector to go to these priority zones now and start to kind of dig around and do a proper sampling program to say, okay, what are we actually seeing here in terms of porphyry type mineralization, skarn type mineralization? And that's going to lead us into what the potential next steps could be as we learn more about this full system that we're seeing within the high grade zone.
Okay. Well, I was just doing a podcast with someone and we did indeed talk about investment opportunities, and one of his priorities is copper, looking at the energy metals, but copper was certainly his favorite. And you said that 5.5 grams per ton of copper in some of the rock samples at
percent.
5.5%. Okay, right. Okay, yeah, that's not a grams per ton. Okay, so I mean, but that's pretty high though, is it, for rock samples?
It's very high. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And on top of that, that rock and the rocks that we're seeing that are copper enriched also have really elevated gold and silver values as well, which is interesting because typical what's called a potassic porphyry system will have copper, gold, and silver. So the three metals that you would expect to see in a potassic porphyry system is what we're seeing at Garfield, which gives us further confidence in the fact that we could be dealing with a porphyry or intrusive related mineralizing body here at the high grade zone.
Okay. And will it be the high grade zone only that you're going to focus on for this first sampling program that you're starting?
The priority will be the high grade zone. We'll spend the majority of the time prospecting and mapping that zone. Okay. However, the power line zone is also very interesting. We're expecting to see some additional splays there, some really nice grades as well. And once again, I mean, you can drive all over this property. So it's not like we need a helicopter to get from one zone to the other. One person can visit both of those zones in one day. Okay. So we'll certainly have some time spent on the power line zone as well. But just because of that porphyry alteration mineralization we're seeing now, that's kind of the really thing that we're honing in on and excited about. So we'll be spending a lot of time learning more about that area and what the potential could be.
And are you looking to start this sampling program like pretty soon? And when would you look to complete it? And also, what's the outcome? What's the objective? Or what would you like to have achieved at the end of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of start dates, we're just finalizing the preparations now. So that should be, we should have people on site within a week or two at most, I would say. And we'll certainly put some updates on Twitter as to what that's looking like and what we're seeing. And then the results from that, I mean, as I mentioned, there's up to 5.5% copper at surface there. And that was done by a geologist many years ago who just sort of walked over the zone and didn't understand or didn't have the data sets that we have now. So we're going to do a much more detailed dive into this high grade zone, really kind of combing over to seeing what is exactly there. And then we'll send those rocks to the lab and then we'll look at those results. And once again, looking for things like porphyry type alteration, mineralization, skarn type mineralization and alteration. But really we're looking for finding more high grade copper, silver, and gold. And then also, how do the grades differ and what metals are we seeing at the skarn zone and then the porphyry zone, and how do those differ? And once again, looking to further confirm that we are looking at potentially a fully telescoped and preserved system here, which would be a very exciting development for the company.
Okay, so it's looking to build up that evidence of a deposit and what that deposit might look like, which thus de-risk the project, of course, when you have a discovery, but also will then help you to make future decisions on whether you're going to explore further or indeed look for other options.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about, continuing to build the narrative, continue to add more data sets that get us to our eventual goal of finding a way to monetize this asset and make a big discovery for our shareholders. So we're continuing to inch along that pathway.
Okay.
And everything that we're doing is very methodical, and it builds on the existing data sets. And then what the results from this program that we'll be starting shortly here will help us decide on what those next steps are going to look like when it comes to trenching or drilling, or whatever else we're going to do to continue to advance this property.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's good to talk about Garfield. Hopefully we can do a bit more of a deeper dive onto that project when you have some time. But for now, thank you very much, Oliver Friesen, the CEO of Golden Metal Resources.
Amazing. Thanks, Mark. We'll chat again soon.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like, or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.